Moving on, we now have another leader's discussion on the topic data risks and challenges in a hyper-digital world. In a world where data is the king, how can organizations mitigate data-related risks and embrace security transformations for their digital transformations to succeed? Well, our speakers for this session are Jim Jacobson, Chief Product and Solution Security Officer, Siemens Healthineers. Since 2012, he has been responsible for the global security program for the medical devices and associated IT systems, solutions, and services that Siemens Healthineers develops, sells, maintains, and supports. We also have with us Harry D. Moseley, Global Chief Information Officer. Harry brings to Zoom a blend of transformational leadership, disruptive innovation, and corporate growth strategies. He's the Global Chief Information Officer, Zoom Video Communications, and chairing the session is Supriya Danda, Country Manager, India, and Vice President, Western Digital. She leads India's strategic charter and its expansion, key customer relationships, government relations, sustained growth of research and development capabilities, and serves as a spokesperson for the corporate brand in India. Pleasure to have you all join us this evening. Over to you, Supriya. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Justin. Very happy to be here moderating session on data risks and challenges in a hyper-digital world. And I have fabulous panelists here, Harry and Jim, joining us for our segment. Digital transformation and digital risk, they tend to go hand in hand. Today, businesses across the world are undergoing rapid transformation, as we all are seeing. They are keen to adopt new technology-driven strategies. It's almost said that if you aren't in the business of technology, don't worry. Technology is clearly in your business today. From being an edge, a competitive edge, today, it's the need of the hour. However, as we transform and bring in digitization into our world of business, we are also facing a lot more digital risks. And companies are doing a lot more today to stay ahead of that and to ensure their employees, their customers, their partners, their suppliers, well, they stay safe. The cybersecurity ecosystem is at a critical point today. For example, if you look at a pharmaceutical, the entire value chain, you see there are a lot of advantages. You can use machine learning to look at an integrated production planning and a lot more benefits that come ahead. And there are privileges that digitization provides. However, it also puts the companies at a lot more edge, a lot more thinking to say, how is it that I prevent my data loss, my data leakages? How is it that I protect my IP and trade secrets in an increasingly online digital world? And let's have our panelists discuss a lot more and get some answers that perhaps we're all looking at. Jim and Harry, look forward to an awesome discussion with you. And there'll be a few questions. And of course, the answers are going to be far more exciting. Jim, I'd love to start with you.
Sure.
Siemens Healthineers. When you look at the purpose, the entire purpose is to drive innovation, to help humans live healthier and live longer. Whilst, and it's beautifully said, whilst medtech is a global business, healthcare is inherently local. And I want to draw your attention to the recent collaboration that the company has made with Pacific Diagnostics in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. Jim, talk to us about how you're collaborating locally and yet managing these digital risks at enterprise level.
Sure. So as a medical device manufacturer, Siemens Healthineers has an increased responsibility to work with our partners, work with our customers, with healthcare delivery organizations to secure their infrastructure. We recognize that our partners are faced with increasing attacks, increasing challenges to their cybersecurity infrastructure. So security today is about patients' health. It's about saving lives, and you can't divorce one from the other. So we have an obligation to provide both secure products as well as information to help our partners, our customers secure those products within their internal infrastructure.
Thank you, Jim. Jim, is there anything specific that you would want to call out to say, well, this is one thing we are doing differently today for the last 2 years than perhaps was done before?
Sure. So a big issue today in cybersecurity is the supply chain. So we work to provide our customers and our partners with information about the third-party components we may have in the products that we offer, so that they can best prepare for any new security vulnerabilities that may arise at any point in time. That's just an example of one technique that we use.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, Jim. It's like, you have to look after the entire value chain. There is no, room for independent, isolated experiences. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Harry, my question to you, when we talk about Zoom, December 2019, 10 million daily meeting participants. Let's fast forward to barely 4 months later, April 2020, 300 million daily meeting participants. Well, that's explosive, exponential scale. And what a wonderful opportunity it offered to Zoom in terms of business. However, there were many associated digital risks that were raised with the users of the platform. And Zoom, talk to us about how Zoom has transformed security and privacy practices for a safe use of the platform, all the while accelerating and enjoying the growth and the opportunities that lie ahead.
Yeah, Supriya, great to be here with you and Jim this morning, or this evening rather. That's a great question. Yes, we did see this exponential growth. Zoom was architected and designed for enterprises, great companies, great organizations across all industries around the world. But then we started seeing early in 2020, people starting to use Zoom in a personal nature, from church events to birthday parties to yoga classes. And we gave the software away for free to schools. We had over 125,000 schools in something like 25 countries around the world using Zoom, and they didn't have the same technology structures that the enterprises had. And so you'd have a teacher sort of set up a Zoom class and send it out to 8th grade students, and then they'd share it on Facebook. And the next thing is, instead of 25 kids in class, you had 250 kids in class. So we pivoted the entire engineering team to focus exclusively on privacy and security for a 90-day window. And we did a variety of things. We took the security controls that we had and we put them behind what's called the privacy shield, right front and center, so people could control things directly. The host and the co-host could control things directly. We changed the default settings for different domains. We mandated things like waiting rooms and password controls. We upgraded to the latest version of encryption, AES 256-bit encryption. And then we did an acquisition of a company called Keybase, who then worked with our internal team. This was a team of cryptographers, worked with our internal team on our end-to-end encrypted service, such that we now offer a full end-to-end encrypted service where the keys are not available to anybody but the participants. They're not available to anybody at Zoom. We don't even, they sort of go right through our system. We don't see them. We have no access to them. And so we can now offer an end-to-end encrypted service to over 1,000 participants, which I think is still the first platform that is capable of doing that for such a large population. And then, on top of that, we also introduced what we call our at-risk notifier, which is a tool that monitors the public posts and social media posts, looking for Zoom meetings that have been put out there, and then notifying the hosts that their meeting credentials have been posted in certain places. And then they have an option of whether they want to sort of reset things, because sort of people don't do bad things deliberately. Sometimes they make mistakes, and so we've introduced technology to monitor those mistakes and help them correct them, so that it's kind of like, if the speed limit is 55, and you're doing 65, sort of warning you that you're, sort of at 10 miles over the speed limit and you might want to drop down. So that type of thing.
Awesome. That's a very nice way of putting it. As much as there is use of technology acceleration, well, it's always good to have speed checks along the way. Thank you, Harry. Wonderful. Jim, coming to you, we spoke just about, how pandemic has opened opportunities and how, Zoom has beautifully managed that. Coming to, when we look at the entire world of medicine, there is this telehealth revolution that has taken place, and there are explosive opportunities that are out there. We couldn't meet the healthcare practitioners face to face, and clearly a lot of those solutions have come so handy. And therefore, people have been, like you say, you've been, successful in saving those lives. There is this need, however, to secure, offer secure platforms, collect all the information, and then provide tailored access, to various applications. And yet, when we talk about healthcare data, there's always this little bit of added, hint of caution. There's a little bit of skepticism that you as executives must be also dealing with, but clearly not when we talk Siemens and its use of advanced data analytics to help save lives. So my question to you is, how are you managing the failure risks that come associated with hyper-automation, especially in a sensitive world of business as healthcare?
So one of the things that we focus on is the fact that security is a shared responsibility. So we have our role to play, our partners have their roles to play, but we also recognize that during the pandemic, for instance, staffs are especially challenged in the hospital environments, let's say. And so we have to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to have to build security into the communications paths, to have the right oversight on top of the data. So that's one less thing that our customers have to worry about. They can rest assured that we have put the right controls in place through our software development processes, our secure processes, so that they can sit back and focus on the work that they need to do to secure their infrastructure, or to just process the daily operations of a hospital. There's so much work that they need to stay on top of, and if we can give some level of assurance that we're looking at things, so we have remote monitoring of our products, of let's say an MRI or a CT system in the field. We want to make sure that we're keeping an eye on the security of those products at the same time that our customers are focusing on what they need in order to keep the operations running, to keep the systems automated completely.
Yeah, Jim, so that goes exactly to what you were saying before, which is about the supply chain, that you're managing the supply chain, you're monitoring the devices so that the medical practitioners, so to speak, can do what they do really well, which is give great care, and you take care of the infrastructure to support them. So it's kind of like the notion of 1 + 1 is not 2, it's 3.
That's true. So we have automated systems where we monitor over 1,000 different products for hundreds of thousands of software components that might be in those products. And there's no way that you can do that manually by having somebody look at that. So you have an automated system which is always looking at matching up new vulnerabilities that come up against the components that are present in the devices themselves.
Which is kind of like the same thing that we do, which is sort of monitoring all the public domains, so to speak, looking for, Zoom meeting credentials that have been shared. So it's the same notion, so that, Supriya, you don't have to worry, and you don't have to check have your meeting credentials being shared. We're monitoring that on your behalf.
Thank you so much, Harry, for that, for keeping our world, the data safe. And Jim, thank you so much for doing all the work at the infrastructure level, like Harry also, pitched in to say, so that the people who are supposed to do their job can just continue doing their job. And I love the way you say security is a shared responsibility, and all of us have a role to play in that. Well, thank you so much. Coming to, Harry, it's like, I want to say one comment before I go to the next question is, there was something I read a while back to say to err is human and to blunder is technology. I just want to get your reaction to that. And then Jim definitely would love your reaction to that too.
Yeah.
And I know you disagree with me. I'm totally fine with that.
I don't disagree. I completely agree with you. It's kind of, sort of, my friends often hear me refer back to, sort of when I was earlier in my career, I was a programmer. I started my career as a programmer. And, I loved programming. It was fantastic. And what was terrific about programming was if you give the machine the right instructions, it does the right thing. If you give it the wrong instructions, it does the wrong thing. With humans, that does not apply. You can give the team the right instructions and they can still do the wrong thing. So, but they don't do it deliberately. As Eric Yuan, our CEO and founder, says, it's like people don't come to work with an objective of doing the wrong thing. Accidents happen.
That's true.
And it's kind of, accidents happen every day. It's like, when somebody, backs the car out through the garage door, they didn't do it deliberately. It was an accident. Somebody drops the glass, they didn't do it deliberately. It's an accident. Accidents happen because we're humans and we need to remember that.
Beautiful.
I just want to point out one caveat against what you just said, Harry. Accidents happen, of course, and it's not intentional, but there are people who are intentionally trying to attack hospitals, trying to break into systems to access the data, or which could compromise safety. So we have to watch out for that.
I agree with you, Jim. Completely agree with you. And it's like and when they do attack, the hospitals and healthcare, and we saw that in Britain recently, where there was a ransomware attack on not actually Britain, I think it was in Ireland.
Ireland, yeah.
Well, people die as a consequence of that. They can't get the right care, they can't get the right treatments, they can't get the right operation, they can't get the right diagnosis. I mean, that's that's a criminal activity in my mind.
It is. It's definitely criminal. But it's an arms race. So we have to always be right every time. They only have to be right once. And then they're in, and then they have the data, for instance.
Yeah, you're absolutely 200% correct. Couldn't have said it better myself. You're absolutely right.
It's like we have the term called bad actors, right, who are threatening our lives online. It was earlier restricted to only bad movies, directions, and only a Hollywood, or in India, we call it a Bollywood play. Well, now it's in our lives online and digital. But gentlemen, with you at the helm, I'm sure the world is a lot more safer. And so thank you for that. Harry, my question to you quickly. You said it beautifully, work is something that you do, and it's not a place that you go to anymore. We're all living in changing paradigms. We're all rethinking, shifts are happening in our mind, and of course, in the way we live. And Zoom is, of course, at the helm of this transformation. The future of work is predicted to be hybrid, and Zoom has excellent solutions that are connecting the hybrid workforce. So how are you responding to challenges of a rising hybrid workforce models, and then the associated endpoint threats that you may be perceiving?
Yeah, that's we are doing a lot in the hybrid work model, as you sort of so rightly said. It's like the world is definitely moving hybrid, whether it's sort of for meetings or for events. There's a phrase that's come up recently called the resignation surge, which is sort of to do with employees resigning because en masse, because they've relocated and they don't want to work in a corporate office 5 days a week. We're seeing, so I was talking to one of our clients last week based in Alabama, and they're seeing that the big tech companies have come in to recruit from Alabama and saying, oh, by the way, you don't need to relocate, and we'll pay you the same salary, that you would get in San Francisco. So we're seeing a lot of like wage inflation. We're seeing a lot of flexibility. And we're also seeing, quote, the myths of the past being sort of destroyed, which is, you know, you can work from anywhere, you can be very productive for many millions of people, not for everybody, but for many millions of people, hundreds of millions of people around the world, proven to be very productive and very effective. You know, I'm sitting here and, you know, full disclosure, shorts and sandals. My, you know, sort of 18-month-old puppy is under the desk, and life is good. It's like, you know, I don't really miss, you know, sort of globe trotting at all, quite honestly. I have breakfast with my wife every day. You know, Zoom is doing an awful lot to support this work model with things like virtual assistant. We introduced our what we call our smart gallery view, which is sort of the ability for streaming people who are in conference rooms out to individual tiles, because what we've seen is, you know, sort of the democratization of meetings. If you look at the three of us here, you know, our heads are all the same size. There is no hierarchy. It works for introverts. It works for extroverts. And it's very inclusive. You can tie people in from all around the planet. And you've got this collaborative environment as well. So how do you maintain that in the hybrid model? So our smart gallery is really focused on that, which is to sort of make sure that people feel inclusive, people don't feel disenfranchised, that they can collaborate. We're going to be introducing our whiteboarding technology later this year, which is again, you know, sort of upping the ante, so to speak. And part of our vision is, you know, how do you make the virtual world, you know, as good as, if not better, the in-person world? And so, and all of this, of course, is having a nice impact on carbon footprint as well, in terms of, you know, sort of reducing the amount of carbon emissions in the world. What was the second part of your question? I'm sorry.
I think you've answered most of it, Harry, which is to say, how are you transforming? And I'd love the personalization of the answer. So thank you so much for that. Love that. Thank you. And we look forward to a lot more Zoom solutions integrating and coming into our lives. And I think that is going to make the world even more inclusive. Jim, coming to you, when we look at, you know, Siemens Healthineers, I love the name actually. And I was reading the history, and it's just fascinating how you look at pioneering in technology and engineering, and you have the Siemens Healthineers. We talk about your technology touches over 240,000 patients every hour. That's a huge number. And clearly it's vital that your teams will understand the cybersecurity threats, and it must be internalized in their way of working. How do you as a leader recalibrate your cybersecurity policies for a long-term sustainability, and what essentially are your top priorities?
Yeah, so we have our cybersecurity policies built completely into our quality system. So security is a quality aspect of everything that we do. We take a holistic view of security. So we're not just focusing on putting individual security controls into our products, but that we have the right environment to develop software securely. So our secure development lifecycle incorporates holistic security from that aspect of it. But we make sure that we have all the standard capabilities in our processes defined, and that we have the right education. So we have threat modeling, we have secure architecture and design, we have a standardized control library of that we use to build into our products. We have software testing for security built into our normal software testing processes, so that it's part of everything that we do, that there's no escaping it, that you have to go through the right steps in order to release a product, or it's not releasable by our definition.
Awesome. So what I hear you saying, Jim, is you're designing for security. It's not that you design and they make it safe. That's pretty much what the essence comes out. Is my understanding correct? That's
right. We design it in. It's much more effective to design security in from the ground up, because you'll never get as good a solution if you see it as something to do at the last step. or
Oh.
after the
Yeah,
fact?
security has got to be embedded into the DNA, into the culture of the organization. Otherwise, it's if you think about sort of if you're building an office building and then afterwards you think about the security of the building, it's harder to retrofit. You got to sort of open up walls and tear down things, etc. It's much easier to think of it right from the get-go.
Absolutely.
And in order to do that, you need to have the people trained in security appropriately. So we have a big focus on our training program where we certify our security experts who are embedded in the product teams in what they have to do. So everyone knows what they're responsible for.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then you've got the ongoing monitoring and the ongoing training and the ongoing testing and external third-party reviews. I'm sure you do, Jim, you do that with your products like we do with ours.
Sure.
So that, so that it's always like it's like the 4I principle, right? So it's kind of like I program it and Jim checks me.
Absolutely.
I'm always checking you, Harry.
Appreciate that, Jim. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome, beautiful. I mean, talking about culture, Jim, you spoke about that, right? How this is a culture and that's how it's institutionalized and trained and retrained and kind of kept, ahead of the game. So Harry, in your business, when we look at, and this is true for any business, but my question is when we look at the rising digitization and the explosion of the opportunities, clearly there's also this explosion of digital risk alongside. So at one end, we're talking innovation, and the other end, we're talking about compliance, regulation, safety. How is it that as a culture, you balance both?
Yeah, it's
Well, go ahead, Harry.
No, go ahead.
So we recognize that our responsibilities when it comes to evaluating risk are there. So we build cybersecurity into our entire enterprise risk management approach. But it's more than just compliance. It's much more than just compliance. You can just meet the letter of the law and still end up with something that won't be secure once it's delivered into the customer's facility. So it's taking that, as I was saying, that holistic approach of security, that it is a shared responsibility, but in order for it to be a shared responsibility, we need to be very clear to our customers what their responsibilities are or what the security posture is of our systems so that they are maintained in a secure manner once they're in the field.
Sure. Thank you, Jim. Harry, your view on innovation and regulation?
When it comes to sort of compliance and regulations and sort of clearly, these are important factors in our lives, have always been and will always be. And as Jim so correctly said a moment ago, it's you don't want to just meet the letter of the law. You got to exceed that. You got to be way beyond that. You got to think it through, because at the end of the day, people care a lot about their personal privacy. Especially when you think about what Jim does in the healthcare industry, you think about what we do. It's like every industry in the world, not just healthcare, but financial services, professional services. It's personal data is critical, and so we've done, sort of a lot of work in that space, and we'll continue to do so to protect the identity of people. We don't monitor meetings. We don't monitor any of the data. We don't have access to that, etc. We're, super focused on that. We've enlarged our whole data privacy team and security team over the last 18 months. It's now dramatically larger than what it was previously, but then Zoom is a dramatically larger company today than what it was, 18 months ago. So, and last point is, it is a very, and I'm sure Jim, you would agree, it is very difficult to balance innovation with security and compliance. But we make a point of security and compliance, privacy always wins. That's not an area to compromise on. And being in many discussions where the challenge has been brought up, And it's kind of like, okay, we'll go back to the drawing board and figure out a way to make sure that we're not even thinking about compromising security and compliance. It's got to, it's table stakes.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Harry, for sharing that. There are many more questions, but however, we will have to close the session as we are at the top of the hour that is dedicated. I would want to thank you so much, and you, Jim, for absolutely wonderful insights on how Siemens, Healthineers, and Zoom are transforming, keeping us safe. Well, to the viewers, there is a lot more evolution. There is a lot more innovation. There are, of course, challenges that are there, and data risk is going to be a priority. And we will continue to focus on how to design for security and make sure that we keep the world a lot more safe. You've also heard the leaders talk about two very critical things. They are going to institute speed breakers along the way so that you can accelerate, but there'll always be these healthy reminders that will come in. And of course, we conclude that security is a shared responsibility. Each one of us need to do our job to make sure that the world overall is safe. And of course, a lot more inclusive with technology giving us the access that wasn't possible in the previous era. Thank you so much, Jim. Thank you so much, Harry. With that, thank you.
My pleasure.
Great to be here.
Well summed up, Supriya. Thank you so much, Jim and Harry, for that very interesting session on overcoming CX hurdles by developing database persona and intervention.